So we have a bit of interesting news when it comes to WWE potentially monitoring the situation with Impact Wrestling stars' current expiring contracts. Now we know the situation when it comes to Impact Wrestling because a lot of their top stars do have contracts that are expiring at the end of this year, so in a couple of days' times, or in the first quarter of 2021. So the next few weeks is going to be very, very interesting when it comes to several top talents in Impact Wrestling, whether or not they decide to re-sign with the company or they choose to become free agents and sign with other companies such as WWE, AEW, Ring of Honor, MLW, New Japan. There is a variety of options out there, but what is very, very interesting is that it looks like WWE might be first in line to looking and making some overtures for these talents' contracts that are set to expire in the coming days and months. Now, despite having still several talents under contract, WWE is continuing to look to recruit wrestlers from around the world, and WWE is well known at this point to keep an eye out on talent from a variety of other promotions, and it seems like the company now is keeping tabs on the situation over at Impact Wrestling. Now, according to the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer has reported that WWE has begun making overtures towards some of the top Impact Wrestling talent to find out when their contracts expire. Now, Meltzer hasn't mentioned anything else, it's just essentially a throwaway line. Maybe you could see it as that WWE are interested in Impact Wrestling talents because, quite frankly, WWE are always interested in Impact Wrestling talents. They have an entire division of people, of scouts, that constantly, regardless of whether or not they're in a pandemic, that are looking to find new talent, whether it's in companies like Impact Wrestling, etc., in New Japan, or it's in other aspects outside of pro wrestling, whether it's amateur wrestling, bodybuilding, strongman lifting, you name it, they'll look for it. So that's the case when it comes to WWE. So it's not entirely surprising that WWE are monitoring this situation, but what has been very interesting is, on top of Meltzer's report that WWE are interested in several top talents in Impact Wrestling and are specifically looking as to when their contracts expire, Fightful Select, which is Fightful's Patreon service, it's subscription based, be sure to check it out. They've recently reported that the contract season is expected to last longer in 2021. Now, several contracts in AEW, New Japan, Ring of Honor, WWE will expire around the same time. Impact Wrestling in particular locked down many wrestlers to multi-year deals in the spring of 2019, but apart from that, companies like AEW, New Japan, Ring of Honor, and WWE do have talents that are kind of expiring at the same time. So in 2021, we don't know when. Fightful haven't specifically said when. You can kind of do the research yourself, though. That several contracts in a variety of companies are expiring at the same time. So we could see a lot of crossover and a lot of talent switching companies later next year, which is of course very fascinating. But when it goes back to Impact Wrestling, because that's what this video is about here, is about WWE looking at several top talents in Impact Wrestling right now. When it comes to talents that contracts are expiring soon, there are quite a few when it comes to Impact Wrestling. Of course, maybe the one that people are talking about the most and the most famous would be Ethan Page, because of course Ethan Page, one half of the North, one half of the longest reigning Impact World Tag Team Champions in the promotion's history. His contract expires on January 1st, 2021. It's been reported by a variety of sources and outlets at this point that Ethan Page is not expected to re-sign with Impact Wrestling. He did an interview with Sports Illustrated over the summer as well, which also mentioned that Impact Wrestling had allowed him to talk with other companies. It's been reported that those companies included WWE, AEW, and MLW. So there is certainly a lot of people who are interested in Ethan Page. Of course, recently, Jake Crist was released from his contract. That was to expire at the end of the year anyway. He's a free agent. But there are also quite a few other talents whose contracts do expire soon, whether or not it's at the end of the year or in the first quarter of 2021. Those names include former Knockouts champion Taya Valkyrie, current TNA World Heavyweight champion Moose, former champion Rosemary, Rhino, former X Division champion Willie Mack, current Impact World champion Rich Swann, former Knockouts champion Jordan Grace, and Kiera Hogan. They all have contracts that are set to expire in 2021. Now, of course, there are other names when it comes to Impact Wrestling stars who have contracts that expire later on. We're looking at 2022 here for the likes of Eric Young, Kyle Anderson, Falabar, Ace Austin, AC Romero, Sue Young, Crazy Steve, Doc Gallows, Josh Alexander, and others. Now, of course, why would I mention those names? Well, WWE is reaching out to these talents, finding out when their contracts expire. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're reaching out to people whose contracts are soon to expire. They might just be finding out a date for the future. Now, of course, WWE could be only interested in signing a select few wrestlers from Impact Wrestling. They're not going to sign them all. But the company recently confirmed the signings of Desmond Xavier and Zachary Wentz of the Rascals. Still no update, though, as to their partner Trey Miguel and where he's going to sign. Is he going to go to WWE or AEW or somewhere else? We'll have to wait and see. And whenever I hear these stories about WWE interested in talent from Impact Wrestling, I always think back to the mid-2000s, the late 2000s as well. There was a period of time where WWE wouldn't touch an Impact Wrestling star. They just wouldn't go anywhere near him. It was kind of like if you decided to sign with Impact Wrestling, that was your WWE chances done. It wasn't going to happen. Right? For how many years did we hear, oh, Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, etc., oh, they're not going to go to WWE. Why? Because they're TNA guys. They're TNA guys. They're Impact guys. They're indie guys. They don't want those guys in WWE. And now look at some of the biggest names on the roster right now when it comes to WWE. They came from Impact. Whether it is AJ Styles, whether it is even Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre, of course, he came from WWE originally. He's a former Impact World Champion, though. Why? Because when he left WWE, he had that run in Impact. He got over so much that he came back. So Impact stars going to WWE has kind of been the norm, I would suppose, over the last few years. But to me, if I'm an Impact Wrestling star now, and this isn't a situation to bash WWE or anything like that. This isn't anything to throw shade at them. This is just how I see it at the moment. To me, if I'm an Impact Wrestling star, going to WWE right now would be a worry for me because I think they would see a similar pattern, or at least I would see a similar pattern that happens to a lot of stars when they go to WWE now, in that you go in, you sign that developmental deal, you go to NXT, you have huge success in NXT. Huge success. And people are going, I can't wait to see this guy on the main roster or this girl on the main roster because they're going to do so great. They're going to be such a star on the main roster. Look how much success they had in NXT. What happens? They go to the main roster, they go to Raw SmackDown. That success doesn't follow them. Why? Changes, bad creative, Vince McMahon. There is a variety of factors, but a pattern is certainly there. And NXT at this point, it's not the NXT that it was in 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. Back then, NXT had this great reputation, and it still does have a good reputation now, but back then, back 4 or 5 years ago, NXT had this huge reputation. It was cool, it was hip, it had a bit of a modern day ECW vibe with the crowd at Full Sail, the underground nature of it. It wasn't like WWE, it wasn't sports entertainment, it was pro wrestling, and it was focused on wrestling. Why the NXT TakeOver events to this day are still great, because it's just focused on wrestling. Yes, it was under a WWE umbrella, but it was almost anti-WWE at this point. And it was a great way for a talent from the independent scene or a company like Impact Wrestling to get into WWE. You get in, you go to NXT, you get over, you show everyone in WWE and those officials higher up what you can do before you go to Raw or SmackDown. You're almost protected because you had this year, 18 months, 2-year long tryouts in NXT. You honed yourself, you got used to the WWE style, you found a gimmick that worked, and then you would go to Raw or SmackDown. And at the time, especially with the boom of NXT on the WWE Network, WWE were hiring a lot of independent stars, or stars from smaller companies like Ring of Honor, like Impact Wrestling. And previously, as I mentioned, if you were on the indies, or if you were with Impact Wrestling, that just meant WWE wasn't going to happen, really. Then NXT came along and Triple H got in charge of that whole developmental process, and then you had signings of Samoa Joe, Bobby Roode, Kevin Owens from Ring of Honor, Sami Zayn, etc. And it was showing that those past preconceptions didn't exist in WWE anymore. The mold of the person they were looking to sign had changed. But fast forward to now, fast forward to 2020, coming into 2021, NXT to me just doesn't have that reputation anymore. We've seen that journey when it comes to a pro wrestler in WWE at this point. Great success in NXT, and then when it comes to the run in WWE, the transition to Raw or SmackDown on the main roster, it just doesn't happen. And while they're in NXT, you're excited. You go, I can't wait to see them on Raw or SmackDown, because sometimes those shows are tough to watch. But when this guy or this girl comes over, they're going to be so great because they light up NXT. And think of what they could do on the bigger stage. Then what happens? They go to Raw or SmackDown and it's non-stop changes. You are broken down and then you're built up in the image of whatever Vince McMahon has for you in his warped mind. And what you did in NXT at that point, what got you over in NXT at that point, it doesn't matter. If anything, it almost works against you. If you were so popular in NXT, it works against you. Now look at these names: Shinsuke Nakamura, Keith Lee, Riddle, Bobby Roode, Adrian Neville, EC3, FTR, Ricochet, Aleister Black. I could go on and on and on with guys that had huge success in NXT champions, just massively over in NXT, and once they get to that main roster, it's changed. Your ring entrance changed, your music's changed, your gear changed, your promos changed. If you were a heel, now you're a babyface. Everything changes. And I think people are hesitant. Why would I join WWE? I've heard these horror stories. And in the past, I think the decision was almost forced for them when it came to pro wrestlers. I think it was forced for them because it was WWE. This is where you make your money. This is where you really set yourself up for your future. This is where you get your fame, and this is where you perform on the big stage and you travel the world. You have your WrestleMania moment, your Royal Rumble moment. You can do it all. They're the biggest show in North America. They're the biggest show in the world. This is where you make your money. Now that's not the case. Now that isn't the case anymore. Yes, you can make a lot of money in WWE, but you can make a lot of money in AEW. You can make good money in Impact Wrestling or New Japan or Ring of Honor or MLW, or even just work in the indies when they're back. Yes, you can make good money on the indies as well. I know that's maybe not the situation right now, but when it comes to WWE, it's still the dream for most people. But now, just because WWE is interested, that doesn't mean the talent will go there anymore, I think. So I think it's interesting to see that WWE, look, they are interested in when these contracts expire for these top Impact Wrestling stars, but I don't think it's a sure thing. Let's go through a couple of the names that I mentioned. Trey Miguel, of course, now his contract has expired with Impact. He's currently a free agent. And at a time where Des and Wentz have signed with WWE, his future, where his future lies, is still up in the air. I still think at this point, the fact we haven't heard an announcement from Trey Miguel says to me that he holds those fears that I mentioned. Is it really the right place for me to go, WWE, right now? And I think his style suits better to AEW. There would be a concern, and this is always my concern with anyone that goes to AEW, is will they get lost in the shuffle? I think it's a possibility and it's something to consider. Nevertheless, I think Trey Miguel at this point, I think he will sign with AEW. I really do. Ethan Page is another one. I think at this point it's well documented he is probably going to be leaving Impact Wrestling. But when it comes to Ethan Page's future, I've always said I think he's going to go to AEW. Why? He has a lot of suitors there and fans and types of Cody Rhodes is a big fan of Ethan Page. Has worked with him in Ethan Page's own promotion. You look at all of the outside interests Ethan Page has, whether it's his vlog, his Twitch, his own promotion. If he goes to WWE, that's gone. That's not happening. They won't allow them to do that. Whereas if it's in AEW, they would allow him to keep doing that. Taya Valkyrie's another name that could potentially be on her way out soon. Where does she go? Well, I think she could go to WWE. Of course, she has the connections there with John Morrison. She is the wife of John Morrison. And I think when you look at the lay of the land there, where what's left for her to do in Impact, not a lot. She will be at Hard to Kill. But that would probably, I think, might be her last appearance. Again, we don't know the exact dates of these contracts expiring. And I think Taya Valkyrie, if you want to weigh up where's the best place for you to work, in terms of being a female wrestler, it's absolutely WWE, because we know AEW's philosophy on booking women's wrestling. It's just nowhere near the level or strength of WWE. So Taya Valkyrie would be a name that I do expect to sign with WWE if she indeed does leave Impact Wrestling. And other names that do expire later on, such as Moose. I expect Moose to stay with Impact Wrestling. He's heavily featured in at this point. I think he's going to be a future Impact World Champion. Rosemary, I think at this point, if she goes to WWE, I don't know if they allow her to be the Rosemary character. And AEW, why would you want to go there if you're a female wrestler? I think the Knockouts division is far, far stronger than the AEW's women's division. Impact Wrestling is just fundamentally better at booking talent when it comes to the women's wrestling division in that company in comparison to AEW. So I think Rosemary will stay. When it comes to Willie Mack, again, I think Willie Mack will stay. Rich Swann, I would be stunned if Rich Swann left. He's just become the Impact World Champion for the first time. So I really expect him to stay for the long haul. I don't think he'll be World Champion for a huge amount of time in 2021. As I mentioned, I think Kenny Omega will become the Impact World Champion. It's a big prediction. I don't know if that's the case, but nevertheless, I don't expect Rich Swann to leave. If anything, I expect him to sign a contract extension with Impact Wrestling. Again, we don't have the exact dates of when his contract expires in 2021, so it could be a case of expiring in a year's time. We just don't know. And Jordynne Grace is an interesting one because, again, she has been Knockouts champion. You do question what else is there for her to do in Impact Wrestling. Of course, she could potentially become Knockouts Tag Team Champion in the future. She's teaming with Jazz at the moment as well, so that is certainly something to consider for her. But I think, again, another one, just because of the way the way WWE is so strong in booking women's wrestling, I think Jordynne Grace might consider going to WWE because it's different. It's different for the male talent and the female talent in WWE. The female talent is some of the arguably the best talent on the show, and their booking is very strong in WWE. The male talent, not so much. WWE has no issue in creating female stars in WWE. Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, Bayley, they all came through that NXT system. You know, it's very, very strong. Carmella is another name. She just main evented or had a match with Sasha Banks too. So it's different when it comes to the female superstars going over. So I wouldn't be stunned if Jordynne Grace did eventually sign with WWE. But of course, we'll have to wait and see. And as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on WWE looking to discover when some top Impact Wrestling stars' contracts expire soon, and potentially making overtures to those top talents when their contracts expire? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, WWE, AEW, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved with the community and drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. It really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak for you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.